Hi, this is Debbie, and today I'm sharing a video I created for my Doodling with Debbie series for Simon Says Stamp. Oh, it's been a while since I got the coloured pencils out. However, I really enjoyed painting this beautiful Mum's Spring Flowers set the other day and wanted to use the pretty flowers again. And just so you know, all products used in my card today are listed and linked below for your convenience. Okay, so here's the card I made the other day, all soft, muted watercolours. And when I was thinking of how I could use the Mum Spring Flower set again, I thought about the colouring medium and also the alignment of the stamp on the card. For today, I went for Pencils on Craft and then offset the flowers to the right corner of the card front for a different perspective. I worked on Neenah Desert Storm card, which is sturdy enough to take a firm hand when colouring and also withstand a little water in the form of the white gouache base layer to the flowers. I keep my card in the Simon Says Stamp pockets and label them top left so I keep tabs on what it is in which pocket. I keep any scraps of the card in the front and try and use them up each time before starting a new sheet. I had a piece of card big enough, which I cut to 4¼ inches by 5.5 inches, i.e. the size of an A2 card front. This enables me to trim the panel down once I have finished colouring, to neaten up the edges and to ensure a nice border between the card front and card base. I added the card to the MISTI and aligned the floral spray from the Mum Spring Flowers on top so that it set off to the bottom right side. I stamped it in pumice stone ink, and this ink is quickly becoming my favourite as I like the neutral tone it has. For colouring with pencils, you could stamp in Versamark ink, and the oils of the Versamark would combine with the coloured pencils when colouring. However, Versamark ink I've found resists gouache, which is mainly water-based, and because I planned on using white gouache as a base layer to the flowers, I chose a distress ink which wouldn't resist the white gouache layer. I find that fine details quickly lose definition when coloured or painted, and so I like to go over those lines with a black marker. Here I drew over the stamen of the flowers, but I would also do the same, for example, with the features of the face on a person or animal. It saves having to add those in at the end and try and guess where the original lines were. I always like to start with the leaves of a floral arrangement, partially because I love green, but also because I find it grounds the piece and helps when deciding what colour to do for the flowers. I use Faber-Castell Polychromos, but there are all sorts of different coloured pencils out there. Just use what you have. The colours I chose were olive green yellowish, white, sepia, earth green, pine green and chromium green opaque. The white and sepia are for the highlights and shadows respectively, and the other colours form the main core colour of the leaf. On this first leaf, as I found my way, I blocked in the shadows nearest where the flower petals overlapped and then the highlights, imagining a light coming in from the top right. I then worked my way from darkest to lightest and back again, slowly blending the leaf colours together. I find it's good to have a range of colours as it adds interest. I'm keeping this first bit of colouring at normal speed. I think it isn't frequent to see normal speed videos, and it helps to see how slowly people actually work. However, this card took me a while to colour, over 2 hours I think, and if I left all the footage in, you would fall asleep. So I will speed things up and also only include sections of the colouring. Once I'd coloured one leaf, I then just repeated the process around the image until I'd coloured all the leaves. I'm not the greatest at colouring with pencils. You should see what an artist such as Australian C.J. Hendry can do. Wow, so hyper-real. My method is simply to block in the darkest areas and then work to the lightest, all the while blending with the layer beforehand. With this leaf, once I'd got to the highlight area, I thought the white looked a touch harsh, and so I softened the highlight with a warm yellow. Leaves have a lot of yellow in them anyway, and yellow always symbolises the colour of warm sunshine, so it seemed appropriate to bring in here where the sun would be hitting the leaf if it was shining from the top right. I don't think it matters too much where you put shadows and highlights as long as you include them. They bring a subject to life and prevent everything from looking flat and uninteresting. I worked my way around the image, colouring in the leaves, although later on I realised I missed one next to the first leaf and have to come back and colour that later. However, for now I moved on to the flowers. I wanted the flowers to appear like white blossom. You could add lots and lots of white pencil when colouring the flowers, but a quick and easy tip is to paint the petal with white gouache first before colouring on top. Gouache is an opaque medium and I always keep some white gouache with me in a little tub. I use it so often for splatter, but it does have other purposes too. I like to mix it with my traditional watercolours to give me a range of opaque colours, and also, as I mentioned, I use it a lot for white splatter at the end of colouring a piece. More on that later. I did dry this first petal after applying the gouache, but as I added on a thin layer of white gouache, it dried quickly, and later on when I painted several petals at once, the first petal had dried and was ready for colouring before I'd finished painting the others. You could paint over the whole flower area, but I think it would be too difficult to work out the areas involved. Painting 1 or 2 petals at a time means you are clear on which areas to colour. The colours I used were light flesh. I strongly dislike names that refer to skin colours, but these are traditional pencils and have been named like this for a long time. Moving on, and there was medium flesh, dark flesh, red violet, white and light red violet. I planned on using the pinky peaches for adding to the centre of the flowers, similar to how white blossom has that pink to it, and then using the red violet colours for some shading. You wouldn't want to use grey for shading, for example, as I think grey flowers just wouldn't look nice. However, when it came down to it, I found some of the brighter tones in my mix a little bright for this muted tone loving girl, and so later I brought in Caput Mortem for dark hues and included the yellow again for warm tones here and there. That yellow was called Light Yellow Ochre. I've been rambling on about which colours I included, but the key to all of this is white. The white base from the gouache and then the use of white pencil over the top to bring it all together. Notably, I've had this set of coloured pencils for a long time and I have not had to replace any of them apart from the white pencil, which I've replaced a few times. Not only does white add highlights, and in this case is the base of the whole flower, but it is also the pencil I like to bring all the other colours together with. When you rub over the top of other coloured pencils, it blends them, and I find I use the white pencil as my blending option more than any other. Jumping back to white gouache for a moment, and its opaque properties mean that if you make a mistake, you can paint over it and do it again. I mistakenly lost the centre of the third flower when colouring, but I went over that area with white gouache and you wouldn't know. I painted the flower centres for the other 2 flowers and then coloured these with a combination of the light yellow ochre and sepia that I used elsewhere in the colouring. Picking up that white gouache again, and I used it to add highlight interest around the colouring. I added dots for the tops of the stamens, a few swishes on the petals where the light would be catching them, and even a little to emphasise the veins on the leaves. Finally, I pulled out that black pen again and drew in the outline in a few places, which would have been in the deepest shadows. Essentially adding the white gouache and then the pen work at the end emphasised the lightest highlights and the darkest shadows, bringing in contrast and interest. Back to the white gouache, I tell you it is an essential in my kit, and I splattered lightly over the flowers and onto the untouched craft card around them. This simple trick helps the flowers to become part of the card as a whole rather than stuck on one edge. I'm not big into sentiments on my cards. The colouring is the main focus for me, but it is handy to have them on a card. However, I tend to gravitate to simple, minimalist greetings. Kathy Zilski is the queen of clean and simple, and these clean line stacks greetings she designed are an example of just that. There are matching dies for the larger sentiments, but I went for the wee sending hugs at the bottom. I stamped this in Nocturne ink on a scrap of ivory card and then trimmed out with a craft knife and metal edge grid ruler on a cutting mat. I added the sentiment to the card with foam tape and the use of a T-square ruler to get it on straight, but I still managed to muck up that and had to straighten it out later. I am the queen of wonky lines, it seems. I added the card front to a card base, cut and scored from ivory card, again using foam tape, and then sorted that greeting out. Now, if you are like me and have been crafting for a while, then you will have a stash of enamel dots hidden away somewhere. Well, in a recent tidying spree, I cut apart all of the packets of enamel dots I had, which were in lovely coordinating colour groups, but I could never find the colour I wanted. Well, I cut them all apart, sorted them into rainbow order, and then tucked each colourway into a Simon Says stamp pocket. Now when I want to add a finishing touch to a card, I can quickly pull out the colours I might need and see which is the best match. The only disadvantage to this is I am less sure on where the enamel dots originated from. I do recognise those pale pink ones I used as coming from Hero Arts though. I added enamel dots in 3 places around the image to form a visual triangle. I don't know the whys and what fors of this, but triangles are supposed to be interesting to the eye, as are groups of uneven numbers, which is why when I stamped the flowers on the corner of this card, I ensured I had 3 of them included. So there you go, my pencil colouring on craft of these lovely white flowers from the Mum Spring Flower set, and using white gouache as the base layer to get the white flowers really popping off the page. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I'll leave links in the YouTube description to the products that I've used today, as well as a coordinating link to the blog post over at limedoodledesign.com. I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you've enjoyed this tutorial, I'd be delighted if you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.